Warden Valdris stared at the sensor display for the fourth time. He leaned over the command rail and his joints ground together, a dry, mineral-on-mineral rasp that echoed in the amber-lit silence. Around him, the command deck of the ironclad hummed with the low thrum of cycling drive coils. The contact was small, it was slow. Its thermal signature matched a hull design at least 2 centuries obsolete. The ship had no visible weapons, it showed no active targeting systems, nothing made sense. Logician Mordec approached from the analysis station. His mottled hide caught the amber light in patches of pale and dark. His tail hung still, a thinking position. He carried a data slate etched with the markings of a dozen campaigns. The vessel is a survey craft, Warden. The database classifies the originating species as non-spacefaring, per contact status. Valdris did not turn from the display. The classification is 600 years old. Yes, Warden. And you believe this craft belongs to that same species. Mordec's tail flicked left. The evidence is circumstantial but consistent. The hull architecture matches early orbital prototypes recorded in the archive. The drive signature is primitive, but the classification is clearly wrong. They are here. They are spacefaring. Valdris let the silence stretch. The readiness alert cast long shadows across every face on the bridge. Amber glow filled the space. The air smelled of hot metal and recycled nitrogen. A constant thrum came from the drive kept at standby. Standard interdiction, he commanded. Match course, transmit the clearance demand on all frequencies. The Ironfield technician at the communication board complied. A low hum filled the bridge as the transmission went out. It was the formal demand for identification, purpose, and immediate cessation of flight. The small ship did not respond. Valdris counted the seconds. 10, 20, 40. No response, Warden. Repeat the demand. The hum went out again. The seconds stretched. The small ship drifted on its original heading, unhurried, as though the warnings were mere static interference. Mordec's tail flicked right. Valdris gripped the command rail. The metal was warm under his palms. The grinding of his own joints filled his hearing as he shifted weight. Alter course to intercept. Prepare a warning shot, close pass, no impact. Let them see what they are ignoring. The ironclad adjusted its vector. The drive pitch rose as power fed into the maneuvering thrusters. The ship was a predator turning to face its prey. The other vessel had not yet noticed the jaws. Then the human vessel changed course. It was not a combat maneuver. There was no aggression in the correction, no acceleration, no evasion. The ship simply angled itself with a slow, almost confused motion. It began drifting toward the nearby asteroid belt. They are seeking cover, Mordec observed. His tone carried the first note of uncertainty Valdris had ever heard from him. Valdris watched the tiny ship creep toward the belt's edge. The rocks were dense there. The field was composed of tumbling iron and nickel fragments ranging from fists to hillsides. A vessel that small could disappear in that environment. Fire the warning shot, he ordered. Across their bow, let them understand the difference between a clearance demand and an option. The point defense battery on the ironclad cycled. A single pulse of charged particles lanced across the human ship's forward vector. It was bright enough to sear on sensors, close enough to rattle their hull with the thermal wake. The human ship's point defense net activated. Valdris watched it happen and the world tilted slightly out of alignment. The net was primitive. It was beam-based, slow cycling, inefficient. But it was functional. The interception tracked the warning pulse and met it 200 meters from the human hull. The energy dissipated in a wash of scattered light. Silence fell on the Ironfield bridge. No one spoke. The amber light held steady. Mordec's tail was motionless. The humans should have run, Valdris muttered, the words coming out flat almost to himself. Mordec's voice was quieter than usual. Yes, Warden. They should have surrendered. Yes. They did neither. The small ship continued its slow drift toward the asteroid belt. It slid between two large rocks with a grace that should not have been possible for a vessel of that apparent age. The iron walls of the nearest asteroid occluded the sensor lock. The contact flickered, wavered, failed. The main display showed empty space where the human ship had been. Valdris stared at the dark screen. A non-spacefaring species did not outmaneuver a patrol cruiser. A non-spacefaring species did not have point defense. A non-spacefaring species did not vanish into a debris field as though it had navigated such terrain for 1,000 years. His database was wrong. Something fundamental was wrong. He became aware of his own joints grinding as he locked his hands behind his back. The amber light, the recycled air, the silence of a bridge crew waiting for orders from a commander who had just discovered his maps were drawn by blind children. "Pursue," he commanded, "into the belt." Mordec's tail flicked right, alarm. "Warden, we will be navigating blind through shifting rock. The sensor occlusion in that field is near total. If they have weapons we have not seen." Valdris turned to face him. The amber light carved the other Ironfield's face into sharp relief. Every line and mottled patch was visible. The fear was visible. "Then we find out what they have," he stated. "Match course, follow them in." The bridge crew moved. The drive pitch rose to emergency levels. The ironclad will angled toward the belt. Valdris watched the rocks grow larger on the forward display. He felt uncertainty for the first time in decades. It was a sensation like a small, cold stone settling somewhere behind his sternum. Behind the largest asteroid, a power signature was building. It was huge. It was clean. It should not have existed in a vessel that looked that old. Valdris opened his mouth to speak, and the human ship vanished from every sensor reading. No trace, no trail, no residue. The cold stone settled deeper. Freya Lascari set her palm flat on the holotable. The flickering image of the Ironfield cruiser stabilized at her touch. A cup of coffee sat by her elbow, untouched, the surface filmed with a thin gray scum. She did not reach for it. The air recycler hissed in the cramped briefing room, struggling against the warmth of 4 bodies and the stale breath of too many hours awake. "They saw through the hull disguise," she announced. "The question is how much they saw." Carenza Delacroix leaned forward, one hand pressed against her temple. She had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes were red but focused. "The Ironfield are a military junta," she recounted. "Rigid hierarchy, doctrine-based command. They do not retreat from an engagement. They do not negotiate with species they classify as inferior. Their tactical models assume aggression from any unknown contact. We ignored their demands. We activated point defense. We dove into an asteroid field. To them, that is a threat declaration." Morwen Toland closed her eyes. She could hear something in the recycler's rhythm, a faint flutter she did not like. She opened them again. "The faster-than-light drive is prepped," she reported. "I can have it active in 90 seconds, but if we jump, they'll see the signature." Using the drive would expose their true capabilities. The ship was designed to look primitive. A jump would prove it was not. It would also reveal the power source. The ship ran on a void reactor, a power core that drew its energy from dimensional bleed. Its magnetic signature was unlike anything a primitive fission pile could produce. The deception would fold completely. Lascari's prosthetic eye clicked, a soft, precise sound. It was a mechanical heartbeat in the silence. "We built this ship to look like a rust bucket," she reflected. "We cannot run without showing them what we really are." Emil Corson spoke without looking up from the datapad in his hands. His voice was low and conversational, as if he were discussing a game strategy over drinks. "We let them board." The silence stretched, the recycler hissed. Toland shook her head slowly. "Emil, they will find the false bulkheads." "Not if they do not look for them," Corson countered. He set the datapad down and met Lascari's gaze. "We play the terrified primitives. We offer no resistance. We let them take samples of the ship, the crew, whatever they want. We act like we do not know what half our own systems do. They will classify us as a minor anomaly, something that stumbled into space by accident. They will escort us out of restricted space, or they will dismiss us as not worth the resources." Lascari's prosthetic clicked again. She picked up the coffee, looked at it, set it down. "And when they search," Delacroix answered before Corson could. "They will not find what they are not looking for. If we act like we have nothing to hide, they will believe the ship matches the hull. The deception has to hold under their noses. We make them see what they expect to see." Corson nodded. "I ran the simulations. If they board with a full search team using standard inspection protocols, the hidden compartments hold for approximately 6 hours. After that, they start finding seams. But they will not search for 6 hours. They will spend 15 minutes confirming the ship is obsolete, take a few recordings, and leave." Lascari looked at each of them in turn. Toland, whose hands were stained with grease she never fully washed away. Delacroix, who had spent 4 years building a mental model of a species she had never met. Corson, who had never lost a simulation and whose voice never rose above a murmur even when everything was burning. She had chosen them for this. She had chosen them specifically. All right, she decided. We hold position. We broadcast a panic surrender. We let them take a sample of the ship and the crew. She straightened her collar. The gesture was small, automatic, almost invisible. I will be the contact point. Delacroix's breath caught. She did not say anything. She watched Lascari turn to the comm station and begin composing a surrender message. Her captain's hands moved across the interface with the same calm she used to write a supply requisition. Her fingers did not tremble. Her jaw did not tighten. Her voice, when she tested the microphone, was steady and flat. Unspoken to Ironfield vessel, we surrender. Please do not fire. We are a civilian survey vessel. We do not have weapons. We will comply with all instructions. She played it back, listened, adjusted the tone to sound more frightened. Her hand did not shake. Delacroix watched her captain work and felt something cold settle in her chest. Lascari was not afraid. She had done this before. She had been preparing for this exact moment for years. Every simulation, every drill, every hidden compartment, every false bulkhead, every layer of the deception had been built for a moment just like this one. The question was what else she had been preparing for. Lascari finished the message. She did not send it yet. She turned back to face her crew. Morwen, kill the active sensor array. Power down everything that does not need to be visible. Leave life support and basic navigation. Make us look crippled. Toland nodded once and left without a word. Emil, lock the armory and the engineering subdeck. Route control to my station. If they take me, you are in command. Corson's expression did not change. He nodded and began working his data pad. Carenza, Lascari caught her eye. You will be in the room when they board. You speak for us. You understand their patterns. You tell me what they are thinking before they think it. Delacroix swallowed. Yes, Captain. Lascari turned back to the comm station. She keyed the transmit command. The message went out across the void, a thread of human words aimed at a species that had never heard a human voice. On the main screen, the Ironfield cruiser emerged from behind the asteroid field. It was massive, dark. Its hull was studded with weapon emplacements and sensor clusters. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace that spoke of immense mass under precise control. The stars behind it seemed to dim by comparison. The unspoken went silent. Its weapons, such as they appeared to be, powered down one by one. The ship's ambient hum dropped to a whisper. The life support labored on, but everything else fell still. Lascari opened the channel again. Her voice was steadier now, calmer, as if she had accepted something the others could not yet see. We surrender, please do not fire. The Ironfield cruiser did not answer. It continued its approach. Slow, inevitable, the shadow of its hull began to slide across the bridge viewport, swallowing the light from the distant star. Lascari watched it come and did not blink. Her prosthetic eye clicked once, twice, a measured rhythm in the growing dark. She did not know what the Ironfield would do when they stepped aboard her ship. She did not know if her crew would survive the next 12 hours. She did not know if the deception would hold or if it would collapse and take everything with it. But she had been preparing for this for years. And she was not finished yet. The Ironfield soldiers came through the airlock as if they owned the corridor. The space was a stage, every surface stripped, every panel dented or discolored with careful intention. The lights flickered in a pattern that looked like failing circuits, but was really Morwen Toland's finest work. Carenza Delacroix watched her own breath cloud in front of her face. She tried to remember how to feel cold instead of terrified. They were taller than the records suggested, nearly 7 feet, with hides that caught the failing light and threw back a dull mineral gleam. Their joints ground with each step. It was the sound of wet stone on dry rock. Delacroix felt their warmth before she saw it. The metal walls near them actually radiated heat. 4 of them, weapons raised. The weapons did not look like anything she had studied. They pulsed with a slow, magnetic thrum that made her fillings ache. Lascari stepped forward with her hands visible and palm open. The captain's voice came out rough and uncertain, pitched exactly right for a frightened colonist who had never expected to see an alien face. Thank you for answering our signal. We thought we were alone out here." The lead soldier did not lower his weapon. His vocal cords vibrated the air in a frequency that barely registered as sound. Delacroix felt it more than heard it, a hum that settled in her chest like a second heartbeat. "Your vessel matches no registry. Identify your origin." "We are from Persephone, the colony. We lost contact with Earth 400 years ago. The records say we are a generation ship. We have been drifting ever since." The soldier's eyes, dark crystals set in a face that was not quite a face, swept the corridor. He raised a handheld device. The hum of it cut through Delacroix's skull and down into her teeth. She felt it vibrate through the deck plates and up her shins. The device scanned the hull plating. It found patched metal and corroded seams. It found exactly what they had spent 6 weeks building. The soldier grunted something in his own language. The translation earpiece Delacroix wore caught the gist: primitive, harmless, proceed with standard isolation protocol. One of the soldiers gestured with his weapon. She understood before the translation finished. "Separate them." Delacroix felt her legs move before her brain caught up. She followed the soldier into a secondary compartment. It had been stripped down to bare bulkheads. The smell hit her harder here. Hot metal. Ozone, like opening a machine that had been running too long. The soldier indicated a spot on the deck. She sat. "Propulsion systems," the soldier demanded. "Describe them." She had rehearsed this answer 40 times in the bunk last night. Fission-fusion hybrid, magnetic containment, output barely sufficient for interplanetary transit, 2 generations behind standard, a relic. The words came out steady. Her voice did not shake. The soldier listened without visible reaction. Those dark crystal eyes fixed on her face and did not blink. She realized after 15 seconds that he was not breathing, not the way she breathed, something else, a slower process. The questions continued. Crew size, water recycling, medical capacity. She answered each one with the practiced ease of someone trained to lie before she learned to tell the truth. 43 minutes, she counted. Then the soldier stood. The interview was over. She followed him back to the main corridor. Lascari was already there, standing exactly where she had been left, hands still visible, face still carrying that perfect expression of grateful confusion. The lead soldier spoke. The translation came through, primitive status confirmed. No threat detected. The vessel would be escorted to Neutral Station 7 for processing and refugee assessment. The soldiers turned toward the airlock. One of them stopped. He stood at the threshold, his mineral hide catching the flickering light. His eyes crystals, she reminded herself, they are crystals in a mineral matrix fixed on the bulkhead, on a scratch. Just a scratch, a tiny mark in the metal, a marker for a hidden panel that led to the actual systems, to the warp drive, to the void reactor, to everything that would prove they were not a generation ship full of lost colonists. 3 seconds. Delacroix felt her heart stop in her chest. She felt the blood drain from her face. She felt the cold air in her lungs turn to glass. The soldier's hand reached toward the scratch. Then it dropped. He stepped through the airlock without looking back. The door cycled closed, the seal engaged. The hum of the Ironfield presence faded from the metal walls. Delacroix's legs gave out. She slid down the wall and sat on the cold deck. Her back was against the metal. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not make a fist. Her own breath fogged in front of her face. She watched it. She held it. She forced it to slow. Lascari did not move. The captain stood perfectly still, watching the sensor display mounted on the wall. Her prosthetic eye clicked once. Delacroix followed her gaze. The Ironfield cruiser was still there, holding position 100 meters off their bow, weapons still tracking. It was not leaving. Delacroix looked at the frozen sensor image and felt the cold deck beneath her. She waited for Lascari to tell her what came next. The captain's voice was flat and controlled. "They are waiting for something." Mordec had been sitting in the same position for 6 hours. The display screen cast its blue-white glow across his mottled hide, illuminating the pale radiation patches on his forearms. His tail had not stopped moving. Left, left, left. The rhythmic tap of its tip against the chair leg was the only sound in the analysis chamber. The air was cold and still. He had deliberately disabled the ventilation systems. He needed silence to think. He needed to be certain. 73 discrepancies. He had cataloged them by category. Hull composition matched a 2-century-old human colony transport design. The thermal profile did not. Power readings suggested a fission reactor. The magnetic signature around the engine housing suggested a void reactor. The two technologies should have been mutually exclusive. One relied on atomic decay. The other pulled energy from a dimensional bleed. They could not coexist in the same space frame. Yet the sensor logs insisted they did. Mordec opened a channel to the command deck. Warden Valdris answered on the second pulse. It was a short burst of magnetic hum that translated to irritation. "You are still awake, Mordec?" The warden's voice vibrated through the speaker. The low thrum made the data slates on the desk tremble slightly. "The human matter is closed." "It is not closed," Mordec insisted. "I have found 73 discrepancies in the boarding sensor logs. The ship does not match its own records." Valdris was silent for a moment. Mordec could picture him standing at the command rail. His dense mineral hide would catch the amber light of the bridge displays. His joints would grind as he shifted his weight, a sound like wet stone on dry rock. 73 is a large number, Valdris allowed. But sensor noise in a debris field is also large. You are reading meaning into static. I considered that. Mordec's tail flicked left again. The reactor signature is the problem. Fission produces a specific magnetic field. Void reactors produce a different one. The human ship showed both fields simultaneously. That is not noise. That is a contradiction. Perhaps their reactor is damaged. Valdris's hum carried a note of dismissal. The ship is old. The colonists are frightened. They have been drifting for generations. Their systems would degrade. They would degrade in predictable ways. Mordec pulled up the thermal profile on his main display. The image shifted to a cross-section of the human vessel's engine housing, color-coded by heat emission. This is not degradation. This is concealment. The reactor is buried behind thermal baffles. The baffles are too efficient. They are designed to hide something. Valdris did not respond immediately. Mordec heard the grinding of joints again, then the soft hiss of the command deck's environmental systems. The warden was thinking. That was good. That meant Mordec still had his attention. "I have also analyzed the human captain's speech patterns," Mordec continued. "Her voice did not change pitch once during the entire encounter, not when you fired the warning shot, not when the boarding team entered her vessel, not when they questioned her. She maintained the same vocal frequency for 43 minutes. So she has good control of her voice." Valdris's tone was flat. "That is not unusual. It is unusual for a frightened species encountering an armed force from a civilization they did not know existed." Mordec paused. "She was not frightened, Warden. She was performing." The silence stretched. Mordec's tail stopped moving. A third voice entered the channel. Higher in pitch, smoother in modulation. The voice of strategic speaker Briska, her hum carrying a subtle harmonic that Mordec had learned to recognize as caution. "Logician Mordec is correct." Valdris's irritation sharpened. "You are not authorized on this channel, Briska." "I am authorized by my position as your diplomatic advisor." Briska's voice carried no apology. "I have been studying human cultural artifacts from intercepted transmissions for the past 3 cycles. I have found something your military database does not record." Mordec leaned forward. His tail resumed its rhythm, left, left, left. "The humans possess a capacity for systematic deception," Briska stated. "They lie as a social default. They lie to protect themselves. They lie to gain advantage. They lie when they have nothing to gain at all." Valdris's voice dropped to a low rumble. "That is not a survival trait. That is a pathology." "It is a survival trait if your species evolved in an environment where deceit was necessary to compete," Briska replied. "Their historical records indicate periods of intense intraspecies conflict. They developed psychological adaptations for that conflict. Deception was one of them." Mordec's mind turned the information over. A species that lied as a default. A species that performed fear instead of feeling it. A species that built a ship that looked obsolete but radiated the magnetic signature of technology 6 tiers above their apparent level. The contradiction resolved itself. "Warden," Mordec pressed, "the human vessel is not what it appears to be. The humans are not what they appear to be. Something is being hidden. I recommend a full search of the ship with specialized equipment. Void reactor detectors, gravimetric scanners. We need to see through their baffles." Valdris was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of finality. "No. Wardens. The humans have been processed. They are classified as lost colonists. They will be escorted to Neutral Station 7 and released into neutral space. The incident is closed." Mordec's tail pressed flat against the chair leg. He did not move. "You are making a mistake," he warned. "I am following procedure," Valdris replied. "The humans are a non-threat. We do not waste resources on non-threats. That is doctrine." Doctrine does not account for a species that lies. Then we will update doctrine when we have more evidence. The channel closed. The hum of Valdris's voice vanished from the chamber. Mordec sat in the silence. The blue-white glow of the display screen reflected off his pale hide patches. He looked at the frozen image on his main screen, the final frame of the human captain's surrender broadcast. He had watched it 23 times. He slowed it to 1/10 speed. The frame between her last word and the transmission ending. Her face changed. It was a fraction of a second, barely visible. The fear dropped away like a mask being removed. Something else replaced it. Her lips curved. Her eyes narrowed. It looked like satisfaction. Mordec did not have a word for the feeling that rose in his chest. If he did, it would be the Ironfield equivalent of dread. He saved the frame to a separate data slate. He locked it in his personal archive. He did not know why he did it, but something in that fraction of a second told him he would need this evidence later. He was right. The emergency burn cut hard. Freya Lascari felt the pressure against her ribs as the deck groaned beneath her boots. The station receded on the main display, but the scan data was already populating. She straightened her back and let the weight bleed off. The escort cruiser fired a second warning shot. A tight-beam energy lance stabbed past their bow. It was close enough to leave a residue bloom on the forward shields. Lascari did not flinch. She watched the numbers climb on the tactical overlay. Corson spoke without looking up. They're hailing on all channels, demanding immediate stop and return to escort formation. Record it, Lascari ordered. Do not respond. The silence on the command deck stretched. It was a long, thin silence with no room for breath. Toland was bent over the reactor console, one hand pressed flat against the housing. Her eyes were closed. She was listening to the harmonics. The smell of hot metal drifted from her station. It was a sharp metallic tang with an undertone of ozone. The faint crackle of insulation stress came from the conduits. Lascari kept her hand on the helm controls. The unspoken was still decelerating, bleeding velocity into the outer system. The station was a smear of light behind them now, but the sensors had it all. Data capture complete, Corson announced. His voice was flat, professional. Full spectral analysis, mass distribution, and internal energy signature. I can process it now, or we can wait until we clear their weapons range. Now, Lascari decided. She wanted to know what they had seen. She needed to know before the Ironfield made their next move. Toland opened her eyes. She did not look away from the reactor readings. The core temp is still climbing. Those thermal baffles blocked most of the spike, but if they have any spectral specialists on that cruiser, they will have caught the anomaly. We lit up like a flare for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of advantage, Lascari noted. That is all we needed. The display flickered. Corson had started processing the scan data. Raw sensor returns resolved into structure profiles. Energy signatures were classified by type and intensity. Hull composition was broken down by element. Lascari watched the image build. The station was larger than the initial pass had suggested. Much larger. What she had taken for a refueling depot was only the visible portion, the surface infrastructure and docking arms. Below that, extending into the gas giant's upper atmosphere, was a structural scaffold the size of a city block. And at the center of that scaffold, suspended in a construction cradle, was a vessel. She had seen Ironfield warships before. This was not one of them. This hull was broader, denser, with a keel line that suggested a different propulsion architecture. The energy signature at its core was not a standard void reactor. It was something else. Something that pulled power from the gas giant's magnetic field directly. How long has that been under construction? She asked. Corson ran a calculation. Based on the cooling scars and the layering of the external plating, approximately 4 years. 4 years. That meant the Ironfield had started building before the first human survey team had even confirmed they were in the region. Toland stepped away from the reactor console. She walked to the main display and stood beside Lascari. Her voice was very quiet. That is not a defensive installation. That is a ship of the line, a flagship. Lascari studied the numbers. The mass alone was staggering. 3 times the displacement of anything the Ironfield had shown in their public fleet manifests. The weapon's signature suggested a spinal-mounted energy projector. It could probably engage targets at half a light second. This was not a patrol asset. This was a war machine. The Ironfield were not conducting routine border security. They were building the fleet they would need to take and hold territory. Territory that included human space. Why here? Toland asked. Why build it in a frontier system? They have core shipyards. Deniability, Lascari answered. This station is off the official charts. No diplomatic inspectors, no neutral observers, no oversight. They build it here because no one is supposed to see it. The warning klaxon from the Ironfield cruiser cut through the silence. A deep, resonant horn vibrated through the hull and into her chest. It was a sound like a creature in pain. Corson looked up from his display. They are charging weapons, full power draw to the main batteries. Lascari did not answer. She was still looking at the scan data. The ship in that cradle was almost complete. The outer hull was sealed. The reactor was online and cycling. She could see the faint thermal glow along the keel. Internal systems were running at operational temperature. It could launch within weeks, maybe days. If they fire at this range, Corson said, the first shot will breach our shields. The second will hit the hull. And if we run for the edge of the system, Toland added, we have to use the FTL drive, which means they will see exactly what we are. Lascari turned from the display. She looked at her crew. They were waiting for her to make the call, the same call she had been making for 3 chapters now, the decision to let the deception hold or to burn it. She looked at the image of the hidden flagship. She looked at the range indicator on the tactical overlay. The Ironfield cruiser was closing. The weapons were charging. She had the information she needed. They had seen what the Ironfield did not want them to see. Now she had to decide what to do with it. Emil, she said, record a message, full diplomatic protocols. I am going to speak to their commander directly. Corson blinked. Captain, that will expose us. No, Lascari corrected. It will change the negotiation. She knew what came next. The Ironfield would see the recorded message and understand that she had deliberately passed close to the station. They would know she had seen the ship. They would have to decide whether to let her leave or to destroy her and claim the evidence was lost. She was betting they would choose containment over confrontation. But with the data on that display, she was not sure containment was an option anymore. The deck shuddered under Freya Lascari's boots. A low groan traveled through the hull plates, and she felt it in her teeth. The emergency klaxon had been cycling for 47 seconds. It was long enough for her to stop hearing it as a sound and start hearing it as a rhythm. The Ironfield cruiser was 300 kilometers aft and closing. Lascari kept her hands flat on the command console. The metal was cool against her palms. She could see the magnetic accelerator charging on the tactical display. A bright white dot grew in the center of the Ironfield ship's forward section. They're powering main weapons, Emil Corson stated. His voice stayed at conversational level. Full charge in 12 seconds. Evasive pattern Delta 7, Lascari commanded. Take us into the debris field. Morwen Toland's voice came through the intercom, tight and clipped. Captain, the reactor is already at 83%. If I push it any harder, the baffles will crack. The Ironfield will see exactly what we are. They already know we're lying, Lascari countered. Let's give them something to worry about. The unspoken rolled hard to port. Lascari felt the inertial compensators struggle. A half-second lag occurred before the gravity flattened out. Through the forward observation port, the debris field filled her view. Thousands of fragments from a moon that had broken apart sometime in the last 1,000,000 years. Rock and metal, dust and silence. The ship slid between 2 tumbling boulders the size of cargo containers. Corson's hands moved across his console, adjusting thrust vectors, riding the gravity wells of the larger fragments. The unspoken moved like a fish through a flooded forest. The white dot on the tactical display flared. Incoming, Corson warned. Lascari did not flinch. She watched the debris field through the port. The shot would have to thread through the asteroids, if the Ironfield gunner was good. The shot punched through an asteroid the size of a house. The impact turned rock into gravel in less than a second. The shockwave hit the unspoken broadside. It was a rolling slam that knocked Lascari against her restraints. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the lower decks, metal screamed. Hull integrity at 94%, Corson reported. No breach, but that was a ranging shot. They're calibrating. Lascari nodded. She felt the prosthetic eye click as it refocused. The debris field was thinning ahead. A cluster of darker asteroids loomed off the starboard bow. They were iron-rich and dense, exactly what she needed. Alter course, bearing 27 Mark IV. Corson looked at her. That takes us into the densest part of the field. We'll lose maneuvering room. That's the point. On the bridge of the ironclad Will, Warden Valdris watched the human ship twist through the debris field with a growing sense that something was wrong. The ship was small. It was slow. Its hull was patched with mismatched plating. Its reactor signature was a primitive fission design. By every metric his database provided, this vessel should have been easy to catch and easier to destroy. But it kept not being destroyed. Their evasion path is not random, Logician Mordec stated. The pale patches on his hide seemed to glow in the low bridge light. They are moving toward a specific coordinate. Look at the pattern. Mordec transferred the data to Valdris's display. The human ship's course traced a curved line through the debris field. It was not fleeing in a straight line, not dodging at random. Curving, deliberately, toward a cluster of iron-rich asteroids that would scatter Ironfield sensors like light through fog. They know our sensor limitations, Mordec deduced. They knew before we fired. They predicted our pursuit vector. They are leading us. Valdris felt a vibration in his throat, a low hum of irritation. They are fleeing, panic and instinct, nothing more. Their captain's voice never changed, Mordec countered. You heard the recording, same pitch during the surrender transmission, same pitch during the escape. That is not fear, that is focus. Valdris turned his head. The grinding sound of his joints was loud in the silence of the bridge. You suggest I break off pursuit because a primitive vessel flies a clever pattern. I suggest you ask yourself what they are leading us toward. Valdris looked at the tactical display. The human ship was approaching the iron cluster. In 30 seconds it would enter the sensor shadow. If he did not fire now, he would lose the shot. He made the only decision that made sense. Weapons officer, full charge, fire on my mark. The cannon began to cycle. The white dot grew brighter. Valdris watched the human ship slide toward the asteroids. He watched it reach the edge of the shadow. Mark. The cannon fired. The shot crossed the distance in less than a heartbeat. It should have caught the human ship at the edge of the iron field. It should have punched through the hull and ended the engagement. Instead, the ship jinked. A fractional course correction put an iron-rich asteroid directly in the shot's path. The projectile vaporized the rock. The debris cloud bloomed outward, and the human ship vanished into the sensor shadow. Valdris stared at the display. The small ship was gone. No, not gone, hidden. There was a difference. They are reversing course, Mordec announced. His tail flicked right. Alarm, they are accelerating toward us. The data populated the display. The human ship had executed a hard turn inside the iron field. The maneuver was impossible for a vessel of its apparent mass, unless its thrusters were far more powerful than its hull suggested. It was now charging directly at the ironclad Will. They are not trying to escape, Mordec realized. They are trying to close distance. Valdris felt the hum in his throat die. Silence filled the space where confidence had been. The human ship was accelerating. Its heat signature spiked. It was not the slow climb of a fission reactor pushed to its limits, but a sudden, brutal surge that flooded the Ironfield sensors with noise. The thermal baffles that had concealed the ship's true output were no longer hiding. They were burning. On the unspoken, Lascari gripped the console as the acceleration pressed her into the seat. Reactor at maximum, Tolan said. Baffles are failing. We're putting out enough heat to blind half the system. They can't track us through this. They don't need to track us, Corson replied. They just need to point the cannon in our general direction and fire. Lascari looked at the tactical display. The ironclad Will was filling the screen. The two ships were on a collision course, 10 seconds at their current velocities, maybe less. Point defense net, she ordered. Target the asteroid field behind the Ironfield ship. Fire on my command. Corson hesitated. Captain, if we fire at the debris, the scatter will blind us too. I know. She watched the distance close. She watched the Ironfield cannon begin to charge again. She watched the white dot grow. 5 seconds. Toland, cycle the drive. Emergency activation. The drive is not calibrated for in-system use, Toland warned. We'll tear the ship apart. Then tear it apart fast. 4 seconds. Lascari watched the Ironfield bridge through the observation port. She could not see the individual figures inside, but she could feel them watching her, wondering what she was doing, waiting for the collision. 3 seconds. Point defense net, fire. The Unspoken's turrets opened up. They did not target the Ironfield ship. They targeted the debris field behind it. A spray of high-velocity projectiles detonated the nearest asteroids. The explosion sent a wave of rock and metal outward in every direction. The Ironfield sensors lit up with automatic error warnings as the sensor return became a wall of noise. Now, Lascari commanded, "Engage the drive." The unspoken's void reactor screamed. The drive cycled a sound like tearing fabric, and the ship folded itself out of real space. Valdris watched the human vessel vanish. One moment it was there, charging at him, a collision course, a suicide run. The next moment it was not. The space where it had been was empty. The sensor displays were a chaos of debris scatter and thermal noise. The cannon was still cycling, but there was nothing to fire at. Silence on the bridge. Mordec's tail was still. He stared at the empty space on the tactical display. "They had a faster-than-light drive," he said. His voice was hollow. "The entire time they had won." Valdris said nothing. He watched the empty space. He watched the debris cloud settle. He watched the sensor displays slowly clear. The human ship was gone. But it had not fled. It had not run. It had charged. It had closed distance. It had shown him exactly how badly he had underestimated them, and then it had left. Not a retreat. A demonstration. Valdris looked at Mordec. The pale patches on the Logician's hide were glowing brighter now, stress marks. Fear. "They could have fired," Valdris observed. "They close to weapons range, they could have fired." Mordec's tail flicked left, thinking. "They chose not to," he said. "That is not mercy, that is a message." Valdris turned back to the display. The empty space where the human ship had been. The debris settling, the silence. He opened a channel to the command station at Neutral Station 7. "This is Warden Valdris of the Ironclad Will. Priority transmission for Chancellor Thelnir. Code red status." He paused, he watched the empty space. "They have a warp drive. They have a stealth capability we cannot penetrate, and they let us live. We need to talk now." The channel crackled. The reply was static. Valdris waited. The empty space did not fill. Chancellor Thelnir did not move. His dark hide absorbed the dim light, making him look like a statue carved from volcanic glass. The magnetic levitation field hissed beneath his throne, a sound that never stopped in this chamber. It was the voice of the station itself, constant and patient. Briska had learned to filter it out years ago, but today it seemed louder, the pressure of silence between words. Only his eyes shifted, tracking the tactical displays that lined the circular walls. The entire sector spread around them in a ring of cold light. One icon was missing now. The human ship had escaped the sensor grid. "You will explain this," Thelnir rumbled. The words vibrated from his throat, a command, not a question. "I am to file a report to the Compact High Command. I require content." Valdris's hologram flickered at the far side of the chamber. The image was unstable, breaking apart at the edges where the signal struggled through the debris field. His mineral hide glowed faintly along the pressure ridges. The bioluminescence was pulsing faster than normal. "The ship violated every known parameter," Valdris reported. "The hull was obsolete. The reactor signature was inconsistent with thrust output. The FTL drive was faster than our standard patrol units." "Faster," Thelnir repeated. The word hung in the air. "The point defense net was autonomous," Valdris continued. "It engaged our warning shot with targeting precision. This required computing resources the ship should not possess. The crew displayed tactical understanding beyond their stated development level." Briska stepped forward. The click of her claws on the deck was deliberate, each step measured. She carried a data slate etched with the markings of a dozen campaign analyses. This one would be different. "Chancellor," she announced, "I have compiled a new assessment." Thelnir's eyes shifted to her. The movement was slow, deliberate, a predator acknowledging a subordinate. "Speaker, you have something to add." "I have something to correct." She tapped the slate. The central display changed, showing a time-lapse of the encounter. The human ship drifting toward the asteroid belt. The warning shot. The point defense net activating in a precise sequence. "These are not the actions of a young species," Briska stated. "This is not a species that stumbled into space on generation ship technology because their homeworld grew hostile. This is a species that chose to appear that way." Thelnir's tail flicked once, left thinking. "You are suggesting deception." "I am suggesting something more fundamental." She advanced the display to the moment the human ship reversed course. "Watch the vector change. No hesitation, no calculation delay. The ship knew exactly where it needed to be and when it needed to arrive. This is not instinct. This is training. Valdris's hologram shifted. The interference made his image fracture, then reform. The captain's voice never changed pitch. I noted this in my initial report. The fear was performed. Performed? Thelnir echoed. The word tasted wrong in his mouth. You are telling me a primitive species can simulate fear to a degree that fooled Ironfield sensors and experienced observers. Brisca held his gaze. Yes, that is exactly what I am telling you. Mordec's hologram joined the chamber. His image was clearer than Valdris's, the signal routed through a relay station closer to the frontier line. His hide was mottled with pale patches, old radiation scars that caught the light. His tail moved right, alarmed. I have completed the audio analysis, Mordec contributed. The human captain's voice contained no stress markers, no micro-tremors, no breathing irregularities. Her heart rate remained stable throughout the entire interaction. Thelnir's jaw ground once, the sound of stone on stone. What does that prove? It proves she was not afraid, Mordec answered. It proves she was in complete control of a situation that should have terrified a member of a primitive species. It proves we were the ones being assessed. The chamber fell silent. The hiss of the levitation field filled the space. Brisca watched Thelnir's face, searching for the shift that would tell her he understood. She saw it. The dark hide seemed to deepen. The bioluminescence along his pressure points dimmed. He had gone still in a way that was not meditation but computation. He was running the numbers. He was testing the hypothesis. He was finding it true. What do they want? Thelnir asked. Brisca had been waiting for this question. She had prepared 3 answers, each one calibrated to a different level of threat assessment. She chose the one that matched what she saw in his eyes. I do not know, but I know what they are. She tapped the slate again. The display showed the frozen image of the human captain. The steel-gray hair cropped close to the skull, the scars across the knuckles, the prosthetic eye that caught the light at a wrong angle. They are not young, Brisca declared. They are old, older than our records of this sector. They deliberately regressed. They dismantled their own civilization and rebuilt it from a lower baseline. Their ancient technology surfaces occasionally. The FTL drive on that survey ship is not new. It is recovered. Something else built it, something that predates every species we know. Thelnir's eyes narrowed. Proof. Brisca advanced to the next slide. It showed a spectrographic analysis of the hull scarring on the human ship. The thermal damage patterns on their hull match re-entry profiles from a gravity well we do not recognize. The ablation residues contain isotopes that do not occur naturally in this arm of the galaxy. The ship has been in space for longer than human civilization has supposedly existed. Mordec's hologram flickered. The structure is deliberate. The entire human species is a mask. The ship, the colony claim, the terrified surrender, all of it is a performance designed to make us underestimate them. Thelnir was silent for a long moment. The tactical displays continued their slow rotation around the chamber. The missing icon was a wound in the pattern. Then what is underneath the mask? He murmured. Brisca looked at the frozen image of the human captain. She studied the face, the calm expression, the steady gaze, the faint smile that did not reach the mechanical eye. The scars told stories no Ironfield would ever hear. She realized something in that moment. It changed the shape of the universe in her mind. We have been treating them as a minor species, she said. They have been treating us as a test. Thelnir's hide rippled, a sign of deep disturbance. Explain. We are not the first species to encounter them. The records are missing, but the patterns are there. 12,000 extinct species in a genetic archive that predates every known civilization. Someone was saving life. Someone else was ending it. She tapped the slate, showing the ancient star map. Humanity survived something that erased everything else. They are not afraid of us. They are evaluating us. Valdris's voice cut through the chamber. That is speculation. You have no evidence of a connection between the archive and this species. I have the hull markings, Brisca countered. She advanced to the final slide. It showed a close-up of a scratch on the human ship's bulkhead. The same scratch the soldier had noticed during the inspection. This is not a random mark. It is a symbol. It matches a glyph pattern found on the containment vessel of the genetic archive, a symbol for survivor in a language that has no known origin. The chamber went silent. Even the hiss of the levitation field seemed to fade. Thelnir's voice was barely audible. You are saying they know about the archive. I am saying they may have built it. Thelnir's claws scraped against the arm of his throne. The sound was sharp, metallic, a break in the stillness. He looked at the tactical displays. He looked at the empty space where the human ship had been. We will not pursue, he decided. We will not retaliate. We will observe. We will collect data. We will learn what they want us to learn, and we will prepare for what they do not want us to see. Briska felt the vibration in her chest. A low hum, recognition. Thelnir had made the right choice, the only choice that gave them time. The display flickered. A new contact appeared at the edge of the sensor range. The same signature, the same hull, the same impossible stealth. The human ship was back. It had not fled, it had not escaped. It had simply waited. Briska looked at the frozen image of the captain. The smile was no longer faint. It was full. It was knowing. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed everything she suspected. They are not hiding anymore, Briska whispered. Thelnir's eyes did not leave the display. No, they are showing us exactly what they are. The human ship did not fire. It did not move. It sat at the edge of the Ironfield sensor grid and waited. A question, an invitation, a challenge. The answer would come later. For now, they only had the silence and the shape of something vast in the dark.